Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back to the 15th Annual Global Ethics Summit. I'm Aarti Maharaj, coming at you live from the floor of the Global Ethics Summit in Atlanta. Today, I'm being joined by Annabel Gillham at Morrison Foerster. We'll be talking a little bit more about DEI data, so stay tuned. We'll be right back to dive into this conversation. Annabel, good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Aarti. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have a great conversation today. So, for everyone on the line, I am speaking with Annabel Gillham, managing partner at Morrison Foerster, based in London. A little bit of background here. We managed to track down Annabel to talk more about the trend in diversity, equity, and inclusion data, the way that it's been picking up pace, especially in region where the collection of DEI data was traditionally seen as more challenging. To expand on this, global institutional investors are increasingly tracking DEI stats to inform and evaluate their investments. And there's also a wide range of regulatory DEI reporting requirements across the globe. So there's so much happening on this front. And yesterday at the Global Ethics Summit, as you may recall, was Bella Day. And our closing panel on turning integrity ideals into action touched on this very topic. And now today we have Annabel from Morrison Foerster, who are one of our global partners, coming in to share more on this topic. So, Annabel, could you provide us with a brief intro of yourself and background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Annabel Gillham. I'm a partner at Morrison Foerster, based in our London office, and my practice focuses a lot on employee privacy. And as part of that, I've helped a lot of clients, both employers and investors, to implement and manage diversity data collection exercises and the complexities that brings. And just to give a bit more flavour to the topic, I think many organisations have published commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but really we're looking for those initiatives to be meaningful, and really the only way to get there is to have a reliable yardstick by which to measure their progress and by which to inform new initiatives. And I think traditionally, the collection of diversity data has been perceived to be fraught with difficulty, whether that's fear of affirmative action lawsuits or stringent European privacy laws, which the myth is that they prohibit this type of data collection. But really, I think we're seeing companies more and more now look at overcoming those challenges and redoubling down on their efforts to collect diversity data.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for setting the tone there. I think this can now take us into the very first question on how do you think, if you can provide some sort of tangible ideas of how companies are leveraging DEI data to advance its goals?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, the starting point is, there are clearly a lot of different reasons why companies want to collect and use diversity data. And I think one overarching principle in all of this is that fairness and fair outcomes can't be achieved by unawareness. So fairness is not unawareness. So in other words, being agnostic or blind to a particular protected characteristic, whilst that may be more comfortable in some settings, is not the same as that characteristic being neutral. You're not being neutral about it, you're just being blind to it. And I think how we're seeing this framed is diversity data being collected on a wider scale can actually be more objective. If you can collect diversity data more broadly, it can be framed, your initiatives can be framed in a more constructive way than more traditional initiatives like training or complaints procedures. Now, there's nothing wrong with training or complaints procedures, they're very important. But accurate statistical tracking can identify trends and preempt issues before they arise. And what we're seeing, how companies are going about this, is to really have clearly defined goals. So moving away from a trend of collecting data because it's great to have data, right? Everyone wants data. That's not the point. The point is to be really clear about your precise goals, whether that's for particular mentoring programs or for promotion, looking at promotion or recruitment opportunities, and making those goals really visible to your workforce as well. Sometimes goals are driven by legal requirements. So more, and that's another important point, is more and more we're seeing trends towards government mandated reporting. So in the
Mm.
UK, gender pay gap reporting for a long time. We will probably soon have ethnicity pay gap reporting, and a lot of ESG initiatives now will mandate reporting, which is making this not only easier for companies to justify data collection, but also more important, and it's bringing it more to the fore. And then we have the more traditional goals like inclusive hiring, tracking promotion, and the need to increasingly the need to have meaningful data to ensure that any training data you're using in AI recruitment tools, for example, is as unbiased as possible. So there are many different drivers now to
Yeah.
why companies are doing this.
Yeah, to your point on establishing clearly defined goals, I would say that there's so many different areas, right, that folks need to go into, so many boxes they need to check. So with that in mind, of course, while it's certainly an opportunity, it must present some challenges. So could you share a little bit more about that, and what you think are the challenges and opportunities on this front?
Yeah, for sure. And the opportunities are kind of almost obvious, right? We've stated some of them already in terms of performance tracking and
Mhm.
getting a more inclusive workforce. Um, but there are numerous challenges, and that's undeniable. One of the main challenges is, I think, national and regional sensitivities, historic cultural sensitivities. So when we talk about diversity data, and we're talking about, not only gender but also sexual orientation, ethnic origin, disability data, that is sensitive data, and historically, particularly in many European countries, it has been extremely sensitive to even ask for that kind of data. That's one major challenge. There's also an assumption that European privacy laws just prohibit this, that the GDP, you can't do this because of GDPR. That's a bit of a myth. Actually, the GDPR does not prohibit the collection of this type of data, but it does put guardrails around it. So it makes it, you have to be really mindful about things, about how you're going about it and what you're doing. And I think another challenge is just, yeah, as you've alluded to, defining. Sometimes companies don't know exactly what the purposes of the collection will be. They want the data, but they can't necessarily, fast forward into all the different ways it might be deployed. To that, I would just say you just need to be mindful about it. You may have global diversity targets, but try and look at this on a more sort of geographical basis as well, on a more regional basis. Partly because you're only going to really get meaningful data, particularly around ethnic origin, for example, um, if you do look at it on a regional level, because what may be an ethnic minority in one country is not an ethnic minority in
In
another
another
country.
country, right?
Right. So
Yes.
you do need to go granular, I'm afraid. Normally, I love a global approach,
Yeah.
but you need to go granular both on your purposes and on your data categories.
And staying on that piece of being mindful, a lot of our members have said that the data resides in just different parts of an organization. Can you provide some advice on how organizations may bring this information together in sort of a cohesive format to tell a complete story? Ultimately, the data can drive narratives, can help in training. So, curious to get your advice on that.
Yeah, sure. It's not easy. Like, I think the first principle is to ensure data accuracy. So actually, I think the first step is to do an audit of the data. Like, when was it collected and why? And maybe it's not going to be a case. I hate to say it, but maybe it's not going to be a case of bringing it all together necessarily. I think the first step is to look at the history of that data and the source and provenance of it and how up to date it is. So I think the first step is an audit. And then really you do need to track that against local privacy and employment laws. There's no getting away from that, particularly around the more sensitive data. And I think there needs to be an acceptance that for some organisations, you may just simply need to start afresh. You may need to think more holistically about how you're going to store the data going forwards, because ultimately the data has to be meaningful. So, I mean, in terms of general storage solutions, I think we're seeing a lot of clients relying on even third-party providers, because it's it can be more privacy friendly to do things that way.
Yeah.
Or looking towards more localized sort of HR data solutions with strict access controls. But I wish I had a better answer to that question, but there is no, accuracy is key.
Yeah, and it's also case by case basis. So the main thing is that we have, a broad set of ideas, and we could use it as the situation comes up.
Yeah.
So with that, would you be able to just kind of help us drill down on how deep can an organization go with collecting DEI data? What would you say are the various phases and type of information that should be collected? And I know you spoke about this a little bit in terms of ethnicity. That's one piece of it, but curious to know on how deep can you drill down into the collection of DEI data, and what are you seeing among your clients?
Yeah, sure. First of all, the categorizations are really important. So to look at, as we said, on a regional, local level, and often clients will start with the UN definitions, but that go across different regions, or they may look at the national census information to the extent the national census is collected. So that I think the important thing is that the groups from whom you're collecting the data recognize themselves in that data. So there are sufficient categories within it for them to be able to identify with it. A key part of that is, well, there's two things. One is actually consultation with employees before you start. So looking at what is meaningful for them, listening to their views, at the same time also explaining why you're doing this exercise in the first place. And the second one is allowing for self-identification. And that's one of the fundamental human rights principles in data collection, as expounded by the UN anyway, is self-identification. So, there should be no mandatory forms, ideally, certainly not in Europe, but there should be no mandatory forms or categories. It should be voluntary, and there should always be a free text box. So that, and I know that's not always conducive to clean data collection, but so that people can self-identify if they don't feel they fit into another category.
Yeah, and just to build off that some more, you mentioned people have to be able to identify, they have to understand why they're submitting this information. So how can we make DEI matter across platforms? How can we educate folks? How can we move the emphasis on DEI from its own lane to just be part of the culture of an entire organization? And what can organizations do to make these DEI efforts persist throughout, the entirety of the year, or in a 2-year period before they hit refresh again? Annabelle, I realize I asked you 5 questions right there in the form of one question, so
Yeah.
you may unpack it in any way you would like.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there is a lot in that, and because I'm sort of quite focused on statistics today, I do think that, and there's some research that also shows. I think Harvard Business Review have got quite a few good articles on this, but that shows that a sort of the more traditional didactic approach to DEI initiatives, the sort of training, the kind of, you've done something wrong, you've had a complaint against you, we're going to get sued. That approach, I think, can wear managers down. It can sort of induce negative sort of sentiments about the whole process. Whereas, employee engagement, garnering support to actually participate in DEI data collection to make it accurate, provides a far more objective measure. And I think you're then not you're not siloing DEI into some, oh, we've got to attend this training again, or there's this risk here, or there's that risk. But, you use the data to inform more positive initiatives, more positive kind of mentoring groups, task forces. So I think, and that's one way, I think, amongst many, that you can embed it more fully into the culture. Also, I think it's important to say that cold hard statistics are harder for top level C-suite. They will focus on them more easily, I think, than individual stories necessarily. Or that's a broad data set
Yeah.
which can't escape attention.
And with that in mind, Annabel, I know we're certainly over time, but to close up this conversation, in your view, when it comes down to the use of DEI data, what does the dream look like? What does great look like in your view?
I think great looks like a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, where you've had a trustworthy collection process. You've engaged employees. Your participation levels are going up year on year into your diversity surveys, so that they're becoming second nature. You're getting great, accurate data, and most importantly, individuals can actually see how their participation is paying off, what's in it for them. And I think that, so you're better tracking against progress, in all across your diversity initiatives. I think that's it's hard to get there on a global basis, but I think you start regional, and you'll get there.
Appreciate it, Annabelle. And I know we're out of time now. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining us and really taking your time to provide us with this insights on just such an important topic, which remains top of mind to our audience around the world. So I know that this is going to be an ongoing conversation, Annabelle. So this is part one. We're
Yeah,
definitely going to have a part two probably in a couple of weeks. And we will get the chance to just sort of extract one piece of it and really study in another 30 minutes. So looking
perfect.
forward to chatting with you again in a couple of weeks. And for
I would
everyone
love
on the line, you just heard from Annabel Gillham, managing partner at Morrison Foerster, based in London. Thank you so much, Annabel. It was great chatting with you.
Thanks. Have a great conference. Bye.
Take care. Bye.